Welcome back to the Brahmin Word, and we are continuing to look at some great Psalms in the book of Psalms. And today is really, really interesting. It comes right after Psalm 51. So, Psalm 52, you can turn there. But as you do, this psalm really means a lot to me. Had the privilege of taking a course on the book of Psalms specifically in college, and we were given an opportunity to write a 40-page paper on a psalm, and so this was my choice, Psalm 52. So this means quite a lot to me. So we will dive into that now. So Psalm chapter 52 is really focusing on the steadfast love of God enduring, and those that follow after the Lord enduring even when it seems like everything is going against them, or those that are making fun of their faith are not seem to be having their day. And we are told to endure all of that. So, Psalm chapter 52. Of course, before we dive into the actual verses, you have the historical subscript. So, to the choir master, a maskil of David, when Doeg the Edomite came and told Saul, David has come to the house of Ahimelech. So there's a couple things going on. Just like before, maskil is most likely a musical or liturgical term or word. Basically, again, it's supposed to be a song, right? And it involves David, just like a lot of them do. Um, but this one's interesting because of the setup. So, Doeg the Edomite and Saul, meaning King Saul, what that is referencing to is 1 Samuel chapter 22. So, if you go, we're not going to look at the whole chapter, but if you go back to 1 Samuel 22, that's where you will see Doeg the Edomite. He is mentioned in one verse in chapter 21 in 1 Samuel 21. This is 1 Samuel 21:7. Now, a certain man of the servants of Saul was there that day, detained before the Lord. His name was Doeg the Edomite, the chief of Saul's herdsmen. So we already see a couple things about Doeg and Saul's relationship. You have Doeg being an Edomite. What does that mean exactly? Well, he is from Edom, and Edom goes back to Esau. So this fight that goes all the way back to Genesis between Jacob and Esau continues even now to David and Doeg slash Saul. And so it's interesting that we see an Edomite come on screen against an Israelite and against many Israelites, as we'll see in just a second. But not only that, but Saul puts a lot of trust in him. He makes him the chief of Saul's herdsmen. You would think that he would do that because of good character, but as we will see, that is the furthest thing from the truth. So the fact that he puts him in charge, knowing that he has the character that he is about to have, is very questionable, and we go, okay, I can see where Saul starts to really take a downward spiral. And so this is part of the cat and mouse game between David and King Saul. That is part of this. David's on the run, and so First Samuel chapter 22 happens, and David gets help from a priest, and that priest name is Ahimelech. And so Saul finds out, because of Doeg. 1 Samuel chapter 22, verses 9 and 10. Then answered Doeg the Edomite, who stood by the servants of Saul, I saw the son of Jesse, David, coming to Nom to Ahimelech the son of Ahitub. and he inquired of the Lord for him and gave him provisions and gave him the sword of Goliath the Philistine. Now, that Goliath the Philistine part, really, really interesting. We're not going to spend time on that today, but really, really interesting stuff. But basically, he rats out Ahimelech. And so Saul goes. He's very, very angry at Ahimelech. And sadly, Saul basically says that Ahimelech, who is a priest, will die for helping David. Verse 16. And the king said, "You shall surely die, Ahimelech, you and all your father's house." So his whole line will die because he had the audacity to help the nemesis of King Saul, who is David. So he asked guards to do that, and the guards have so much respect for the priests of the Lord that they do not carry out Saul's orders, as we see in 1 Samuel 22:17. So guess who he turns to, and it is Doeg. Verse 18. Then the king said to Doeg, "You turn and strike the priests." And Doeg the Edomite turned and struck down the priests, and he killed on that day 85 persons who wore the linen ephod. Oh my goodness. And Nob, the city of the priests, he put to the sword, both man and woman, child and infant, ox, donkey, and sheep he put to the sword. Now, this is interesting. Not a good way, by the way. But the he that's mentioned in verse 19, it could be reference to Doeg as well. My thinking is it's probably referencing the orders of King Saul through Doeg, just like verse 18. It's not like Doeg goes from killing the priests to then killing everybody everybody in the city. I think he is instructed to do so, and I think probably I think that's probably what is going on. So Doeg basically is a really, really bad guy. He's a really, really bad guy. By the way, one of the sons of Ahimelech does escape. His name is Abiathar. He escapes and goes to David. And David definitely understands the situation, but he adds a little bit to it. Verses 22 and 23. And David said to Abiathar, "I knew on that day, when Doeg the Edomite was there, that he would surely tell Saul, I have occasioned the death of all the persons of your father's house. Stay with me, do not be afraid, for he who seeks my life seeks your life. With me you shall be in safekeeping." So he feels this sense of, yes, sympathy, or empathy is probably the better word, but he feels that for sure. But he also probably feels guilt as well. But Doeg continues to be the person that is called out for that act because he's the one that did it. So all of that is the background for Psalm 52 according to the historical subscript. Again, that's not in the original text, the historical subscript. It doesn't mean that's wrong, though. And as we'll see as we go through it, it's very likely that this is the context for this psalm. So Psalm 52, let's get into it, verse 1. Why do you boast of evil, O mighty man? The steadfast love of God endures all the day. Your tongue plots destruction. Like a sharp razor, you worker of deceit. You love evil more than good, and lying more than speaking what is right. Selah. You love all words that devour, O deceitful tongue. So you have this just straightforward and blunt description of this man that is causing the psalmist so much issues. But what's interesting is that in the middle, or at the beginning of that, you see the steadfast love of God endures all the day long, even in the midst of the boasting of this mighty man. And then the mighty man is described more. He has a tongue that plots destruction, like a sharp razor, and he is a worker of lies. He loves evil more than good. He loves lying more than speaking what is right. He loves all words that cause chaos. and he again has a lying tongue. That repetition and deception, at the end of verse 2, at the end of verse 3, at the end of verse 4, is incredibly important to understand here. And why is that? I think for me, when we're talking about the context of the words itself, not necessarily just the historical subscript, but the words itself, when we're talking about the steadfast God, the steadfast love of God endures all day. A lot of the times when we lie, or when somebody lies, they may get away with it. And when they do get away with it, they may get away with it for a very long time. But I think that's where the endurance comes in. But not just that, but then God gives you a steadfast love. And steadfast really is just talking about I can firmly plant my feet in the love of God, knowing that even though somebody like this, somebody that uses their words for deception, uses their words and their actions to destroy me, uses their words and actions to mock God, who I serve, I will stand firm in the love of God. So even though that person may not get tripped up by their lies right away, at some point they will. And more importantly, as we'll see later on, they have no they have no place to stand on when it comes to eternity. And that is definitely true of Doeg. But when we're looking at this description of this mighty man, it is a perfect fit for Doeg, because Doeg is seen as a snitch, as a somebody that is more than happy not just to throw Ahimelech under the bus, but he also will do whatever is told to him, including mass murder as well. And he does that, and there's no remorse for him. There was absolutely hesitation from the other guards, and they did not carry out the order of King Saul, but Doeg steps right in. I think the reason why he steps right in is because of his history, because of his being an Edomite. And most likely, I'm not going to say that for sure, but most likely not being a follower of the Lord, he has no issues taking out priests of the Lord. Whereas Israelites, even if their spiritual walk is not where it should be, they know the history and the importance of the anointing of the priests. And so therefore they don't want to put a hand on these guys. But again, Doeg doesn't have an issue with that. But now we see, though, some response. And so, verse 5, but God will break you down forever. He will snatch and tear you from your tent. He will uproot you from the land of the living. Selah. The righteous shall see and fear, and shall laugh at him, saying, see the man who would not make God his refuge, but trusted in the abundance of his riches and sought refuge in his own destruction. So you have the Lord stepping in and saying, okay, enough is enough. And he brings justice on this mighty man. He is snatched and teared from his tent. Basically, there's nowhere for him to go. He loses his earthly possessions, which he puts a lot of trust in, as we see at the end of verse 7. But in that response, the righteous ones, those who follow after the Lord, see this and are now mocking him because he didn't trust in the Lord. But what's interesting is the verb fear here. So the righteous shall see and fear in verse 6. Why do you think that is there? Is this a trembling type of fear? No, it is out of awe and reverence of the Lord. You also could say that here the righteous ones are like, oh my goodness, the Lord is stepping in. We have endured, we have stood firm in the steadfast love of the Lord, and he is he is bringing justice. And I think that is really, really interesting to see. But then you have the last two verses as well. Verses 8 and 9. But I am like a green olive tree in the house of God. I trust in the steadfast love of God forever and ever. I will thank you forever because you have done it. I will wait for your name, for it is good in the presence of the godly. So you have all of this. You have this description of this mighty man who has just been a lying and destructive person towards the psalmist and towards others. Um, he is finally given justice for the things that he has done, for disobeying the Lord, for going against the Lord and against those that follow the Lord. And that justice is finally showed in verses 5 through 7. But now we see verses 8 and 9. And I think what is really depicted here is, again, more of the steadfast love of God. But I am like a green olive tree in the house of God. An olive tree really is going back all the way to the book of Genesis. The dove with the olive branch, a sign of restoration, a sign of peace. So the idea, I think, here is that those that trust in the Lord are safe, are very, very safe from the wiles of those that come against them. They absolutely can trust in the Lord. As he says at the end of verse 8, trust in the steadfast love of God forever and ever. And I think a lot of the times when folks see this and yet they hear about the martyrs in church history past, they go, well, wait, how is this possible if people left and right are being martyred or killed for the cause of Christ? Is because the house of God is not just the temple, because the temple wasn't even a thing in this point. If we take the historical subscript to be true, the historical with David, the temple wasn't even a thought at this time. So I think the house of God here is really talking about the eternal house of God. And I think that is really, really cool to see. That, yes, even though we may on this earth suffer and even die for the cause of Christ, we are going to be steadfastly in his presence for all eternity, worshiping him and spending time with him. And I think that is a really, really cool thing to see. And then at the end, it is just reiterating the fact that we can trust him, stand firm in the Lord's love, and endure through the different things that we are going through. So that is a look at Psalm chapter 52, a psalm that means a lot to me, but may not be on a lot of people's radar. It may not be well known, but I think it definitely should be. So, with that being said, thank you for spending a little bit of time with me here today with the Brahmin Word. We will continue to look at more Psalms on Thursday, but I will see you then. Thanks.